In the Undercity, the limestone corridors are lined with masonry so decayed it seems to sag under the weight of the mountain. The flickering amber light of a torch only emphasizes how the environment exerts a constant physical pressure on anyone walking its halls. Every step squelches in a thin layer of alkaline dust that has rained from the ceiling over uncounted decades. The air is thick, carrying the sharp tang of ancient evaporated alchemical spills, and the smell of organic matter rotting in a sealed vault. Navigating this geometry requires a strict marching order. In a 10-foot corridor, the margin for error is inches. Lord Levin takes the vanguard to scout traps. Lucinda holds the center to plug gaps, while Martin secures the rear to ensure the darkness remains empty. Levin's pragmatism is evident in his gear. He deliberately locked his most devastating but volatile magical weapon inside a lead vault back at the surface, opting instead for a reliable, short-bladed sword. By prioritizing these rigid spacing metrics and dependable steel, the party treats the dungeon as a problem of engineering. Survival here is the result of cold, calculated discipline. The party quietly bypasses a rot-scented room filled with sundered chains, angling toward a steep stairwell carved directly from stubborn gray liver rock. A greasy residue sweats from the limestone walls. The dead silence is broken only by the faint smell of stagnant marsh water drifting up from the dark, a clear signal that they are entering a tomb. They emerge into the hall of effete splendor. It is massive, 50 feet wide, with high ceilings bearing the faded, decadent frescoes of long-dead potentates. Beneath their boots lies a thick carpet of pulverized bone and rusted iron scrap. The temperature in this grand chamber is profoundly cold. The passive decay of the upper stairs has been replaced by a distinct heavy musk, suggesting that the hazards here are no longer just environmental, but active. As Lavon's boot clears the final step, a dry, rhythmic rattling echoes from behind a cracked marble pillar. 3 ancient, skeletal sentinels pull themselves from the deep detritus of the hall, rising up with a terrifying, mechanical, and practiced precision. The bones of these sentinels gleam with a heavy coat of preserved black lacquer, reflecting the torchlight with an unnatural, resinous sheen. This is the result of ancient necromantic chemistry. The lacquer is derived from the thorn vine of Chu, a toxic resin used to calcify bone and nullify the impact of blunt force weapons. Lavon instantly notes their vulnerability. The heavy resin makes the skeleton's ancient joints brittle, and their rusted falchions are cumbersome to lift. The physics of weapon speed dictates the fight. A heavy falchion requires a wide, slow arc to strike, whereas a short sword uses a rapid, direct thrust. By thrusting immediately, Lavon gains a temporal advantage, severing the threat before the heavy blade can complete its arc. Lavon lunges. His preemptive strike uses the short sword's superior speed to sever the first sentinel's collarbone before it can even begin its swing. Lucinda hits the center. Using the sheer momentum of a wide crescent swing with her massive iron blade, she shatters the second skeleton's ribs. The undead response is sudden and jerky. Their empty eye sockets flare as they bring their heavy falchions down with hollow, whistling force. One rusted blade bites through Lucinda's plate mail. The impact forces the heavy fighter off balance and draws the first blood of the encounter. A second falchion catches Martin across the forearm. The pain forces the ranger into a tactical withdrawal, dropping his longbow to the floor. The party converts these injuries into aggression. Lucinda recovers her footing instantly, bringing her blade up in a crushing vertical cleave that reduces one of the sentinels to gray dust. Martin draws twin short swords from his belt and steps back into the fray, punching both blades through a skeleton's lacquered sternum with a swift double thrust. The rhythm of violence in this world is an unsentimental exchange of calculated blows. Every wound must be instantly answered with a lethal counteroffense. One heavily damaged sentinel remains, swaying precariously in front of Levon. With a cold, detached motion, Levon's blue blade slides into the ancient cervical vertebrae and severs the head entirely. The animating malice dissipates. The remaining skeletal frame collapses to the marble floor into a pile of soot and resin. A heavy, echoing silence returns to the grand hall. The only sounds left are the party's ragged breathing and the persistent dripping of water from the upper vaults. Past the shattered bones, the flickering torches illuminate the far north wall. A pair of massive double-leaf copper doors waits for them, bolted shut and heavily stained with green verdigris. In the Undercity, victory is never a permanent state. Clearing this room merely grants the company the right and the dread to open the next door. The ossuary of the self-devoured is a 20-foot wide avenue of dark slate, capped by a low 8-foot ceiling. Every 5 feet, the masonry is interrupted by symmetrical niches where bleached skulls rest on beds of lavender-tinted bone ash. In the absolute cold of the Undercity, these remains function as more than decoration. As the party advances, they report a sense of being watched, a psychic friction emanating from the empty eye sockets that suggests the environment is actively monitoring their progress. To navigate this narrow space, the group organizes into a pyramid formation. This triangular arrangement allows 3 people to occupy the 20-foot corridor while keeping their weapons clear of the walls. In this formation, the point position commands the center of the slate path. This allows the 2 flankers to focus exclusively on the alcoves to the left and right, ensuring no niche is passed without being observed from 2 different angles. This configuration is designed to eliminate blind spots. By anchoring their movement to the grid, the party attempts to turn a claustrophobic hallway into a predictable tactical field. The first break in that predictability occurs at the northernmost niche. When the vanguard reaches out to inspect a skull, the act of lifting the bone from its ash bed triggers a hidden pressure release. The response is immediate and mechanical. Inside the ceiling, heavy torsion springs, wound tight for centuries, release with a metallic thrum that echoes off the lamprey-carved stone. 3 ballista bolts launch simultaneously down the central 10-foot walkway. Thanks to the pyramid formation, the flankers stand safely outside the trajectory. Sensing the vibration, the point guard drops to the slate, allowing the iron shafts to pass harmlessly overhead. The projectiles carry enough kinetic energy to shatter stone. They whistle down the hall and strike the niches behind the party, pulverizing the ancient skulls into white powder and spent splinters. The encounter demonstrates a local law of the Undercity. Weight and motion are triggers. Every physical interaction has the potential to convert stored tension into a lethal projectile. The trap's release causes a secondary structural shift. A limestone block in the western wall grinds backward, revealing a 3-inch vertical seam in the masonry. From this dark fissure, skeletal sentinels coated in black lacquer begin to emerge. Their hardened frames are forced to squeeze through the narrow aperture one at a time. Here, the party benefits from weapon speed factors. The skeletons carry heavy, curved falchions that are slow to bring to bear. In the time it takes for one sentinel to clear the wall and raise its blade, a swifter opponent can strike twice. The point guard immediately exploits this short delay. Rather than drawing a sword and closing the distance, he uses the narrow bottleneck to stabilize a point-blank bowshot. The arrow strikes the lead skeleton squarely in the ocular cavity. The force of the impact shatters the brittle, lacquered skull, causing its animating force to dissipate before it even steps onto the corridor floor. By identifying the spatial restriction of the secret door, the party uses the environment to neutralize the numbers of the ambush. A second sentinel forces its way through the gap and onto the slate. It swings its heavy falchion in a jagged arc, but the blade merely scrapes against the links of the vanguard's reinforced mail. The guard retaliates with a rapid short sword thrust. The magical blade carves through the creature's hardened resin coating, chipping away the lacquer and compromising the integrity of its ribs. The flankers occupy the adjacent squares, pinning the sentinel. The right flank delivers a heavy 2-handed sword strike, shattering the creature's shoulder. Simultaneously, the left flank drives twin blades into its spine. The skeletal frame cannot absorb these converging strikes. The sentinel collapses into fragments. This coordination ensured that even a hardened opponent could be dismantled in seconds once its movement was restricted. The corridor returns to silence. All that remains are dark, resinous shards scattered across the gray tiles and the smell of ancient ash. The state of the room has changed. The secret western panel now stands ajar, revealing a narrow vertical chimney that leads upward into the dark bedrock. This unmapped passage is now the only way forward. To the north, a massive rusted iron portcullis remains flush against the floor, blocking the main path. But this victory is a temporary reprieve. In the Undercity, every resolved trap and defeated sentinel is simply the price of admission to a deeper, more dangerous layer of the map. Deep within the Undercity, survival operates on strict, unforgiving logic. This is an environment built of heavy stone, rusted steel, absolute shadow, and lethal sorcery. There is no modern plot armor here. A single misstep in the dark results in immediate, permanent consequences. This animated diagram breaks down their approach into the 20-foot-wide ossuary of the self-devoured. Levon takes point, Lucinda and Martin hold the flanks. They secure a pyramid formation, locking exactly 10 feet of space between each of the 3 nodes. Levon inspects a pristine white skull resting in an alcove. The moment he lifts it from its bed of bone ash, a hidden mechanism releases. Heavy iron torsion springs snap forward from the unlit ceiling, firing a volley of jagged ballista bolts directly down the center of the corridor. The party's initiative roll beats the trap's mechanical speed. Levon pivots flat to the floor while Lucinda and Martin brace on the flanks. Because they held their rigid 10-foot spacing, the iron shafts whistle through empty air, shattering harmlessly against the walls behind them. They walk away completely unharmed. Survival in this space is not a matter of luck. It is dictated entirely by spatial geometry and initiative mathematics. The trigger trap causes a secondary reaction. A secret stone panel grinds open in the wall, and 2 lacquered skeletons squeeze through the 3-inch gap, armed with heavy falchions. Before the skeletons can even cross the threshold, the party secures the first combat segment. Levon draws his shortbow and rolls a perfect natural 20. The iron-tipped arrow punches directly through the first skeleton's ocular cavity, instantly reducing the hardened bone to a pile of black splinters. With the second skeleton closing into melee range, Levon drops his bow. This timeline chart illustrates why. The enemy falchion has a weapon speed factor of 7. Levon's magical short sword carries an efficient speed factor of 3. This mathematical advantage allows 2 vector strikes to complete before the enemy attack cycle finishes. Levon scores a deep 4-point gash into the skeleton's collarbone before it can land a hit. Following his lead, Lucinda and Martin collapse inward, executing a perfect pincer movement. Lucinda's 2-handed sword delivers 7 points of structural damage to the shoulder, while Martin's short sword pierces the spine for 5. The combined trauma exploits the brittle, resinous joints of the undead, and it collapses onto the slate tiles. Inspecting the newly opened secret passage, the party discovers a 30-foot vertical escape flue and a sealed plum wax scroll case. Stashing the scroll, they decide to bypass the exhausting vertical climb and proceed directly north. That northern route is blocked by a monolithic, iron-reinforced stone portcullis. Its spikes are sumped deep, designed to deny passage to standard infantry. Defeating the gate requires raw, calculated leverage. This force load bar chart shows the math in action. Lucinda applies her base strength of 18, while Levon locks in with his exceptional 18/93 stat. The combined martial output exceeds the static weight threshold, forcing the gate upward. As the iron teeth clear the floor, Martin executes a sharp kick, sliding a loose limestone wedge directly beneath the spikes. He chalks the portcullis exactly 3.5 feet off the ground, securing a safe crawl space for the party. Even immense physical strength falls short if it isn't immediately backed by tactical foresight and structural reinforcement. Scrambling beneath the gate, they enter Area 6. The center of the room holds a 20-foot square cistern filled with opaque black liquid. The surface ripples, and a massive 15-foot-tall Stygian maw pudding heaves its segmented gray protoplasm into the chill air. Levon taps into regional folklore to diagnose the threat. He identifies the creature's greasy hide as highly resistant to blunt trauma and completely immune to sleep enchantments. To destroy it, they must rely strictly on piercing shafts and enchanted steel. The creature lashes out with 3 tooth-lined tendrils. This radius grid maps out the monster's maximum reach from the center of the cistern. Because the party maintains their rigid 10-foot triangle formation on the 5-foot ledge, they sit just outside the threat zone.
The tendrils snap at empty air, falling exactly 2 feet short of the armored front line. Over 3 rounds, they systematically dismantle the biological horror. Martin and Levon sink arrows deep into its sensitive central nucleus, while Lucinda cleaves the outer membrane with her heavy iron brand.
Levon closes the final gap with the blue blade, slicing the membrane and delivering the last of the 49 points of damage required to curdle its internal structure. Surviving biological threats in the Undercity requires identifying specific weapon properties to break an enemy's anatomy while holding a flawless, mathematically precise defensive perimeter. The combat lock disengages. The gelatinous horror collapses back into the dark water. Absolute freezing silence returns to the dungeon. The party initiates a mandatory 10-minute post-mortem sweep. Levon uses a discarded arrow splinter to scrape the maw pudding's remains into a flask. This highly unctuous, hydrophobic grease is a valuable asset, useful for lubricating frozen mechanisms or repelling subterranean vermin in future encounters. Martin uses his 10-foot pole to dredge the shallow margins of the black sludge. He pulls up a silver signet ring valued at 30 gold pieces and an unmarred 3-pronged iron key. Every ounce is logged into their inventory, their total carried weight recalculated against their base movement rates. Survival in this unforgiving simulation is never granted by fate. It is purchased inch by inch through applied mathematics, spatial competence, and absolute martial discipline. Covered in garlic reek and mineral slime, the company halts before the unlit eastern archway. In the Undercity, forward momentum is a liability. Lord Levon's survival depends on retrograde scrutiny, the obsessive, backward-looking investigation of a cleared room to ensure no threats remain hidden. This means pausing to probe the multi-limbed idols guarding the threshold. By meticulously prying loose 25 gold pieces in bullion from each statue, the party secures their rear, while ensuring no hidden mechanical trigger is left undisturbed. Martin crouches by the iron-bound gate, sifting through the sounds of the deep. He detects nothing but cold air, confirming their temporary isolation from the horrors they've already passed. This combination of resource extraction and perimeter confirmation forms the baseline of dungeon survival, preventing the mechanical surprises that typically kill over-eager explorers. Transitioning into Area 7, the environment shifts into a gallery of fluted columns. The rough stone vanishes, replaced by pristine white marble carved into the shape of weeping willow stalks. This architectural beauty serves a specific psychological function. It is a trap designed to lull the party into a false sense of security through aesthetic refinement. Lord Levon's touch reveals the reality behind the marble. Hidden within the portal is a zinc-grooved scythe mechanism linked to a floor pressure plate. Stepping on it releases a decapitating arc. To pass safely, Levon locates the mechanical bypass on the hinge, locking the blade in its housing. In these vaults, beauty is merely a layer of camouflage for lethal engineering, requiring a state of permanent, cynical vigilance. The white marble ends abruptly at the eastern archway. Moving into Area 8, the party enters a chamber carved from coarse, charcoal-colored diorite. The dark stone acts as a light sink, aggressively absorbing the weak glow of Lucinda's tallow torch and forcing the party into sensory constriction. To maintain any visual awareness of their surroundings, they abandon their wide formation and adopt a tight, single-file marching order to stay within the torch's shrinking radius. Searching the darkness, Lord Levon finds a mortar seam packed with dried river silt. Behind it lies a rotted leather pouch, tapped away by a previous occupant. The pouch contains 22 copper coins stamped with the profile of an obese satyr, and a vial of blue vitriol, a highly corrosive chemical. In the deeps, these specialized chemical reagents can be used to bypass locks or repel monsters, often making them more tactically significant than standard currency. The journey continues down 30 steep, narrow granite steps, descending further into the light-swallowing stone. A 3-inch layer of velvety soot smothers the sound of the party's iron-shod boots, creating a suffocating silence that isolates each member from the others. Sifting through the ash, Martin finds glassy clinkers, residue of intense heat, and a heavy bronze branding iron cast as a closed human eye. When ritualistic tools appear in a soundproof tomb, the nature of the danger shifts. These artifacts suggest the party is moving away from mechanical traps and toward the territory of entities that use ritual and fire. This diagram shows the scale of the Grand Vault. 60 feet into the gloom sits a monolithic three-tiered obsidian dais. Atop the dais, a faceted glass sphere rotates, projecting two expanding cones of amber light sweeping downward across the floor. The light search pattern halts as a beam of amber infravision locks directly onto Martin the Ranger. Martin is instantly paralyzed. His limbs calcify, turning his flesh to the rigid consistency of unyielding stone in seconds. Harnessing by an anomaly that weaponizes sight, standard martial tactics and armor become irrelevant. The company is facing a geometry that cannot be blocked with a shield. Lucinda reacts instantly by violently crushing the torch against the stone floor, plunging the vault into absolute darkness. Without a light source to track, the amber entity's gaze is neutralized, effectively blinding the trap and giving the company a tactical opening in the dark. Harnessing his 1893 strength, Lord Leven blindly vaults up the slick obsidian tiers of the dais. The hum of the blue blade screams through the vault as Leven cleaves the amber sphere into useless faceted fragments. Survival in these corridors is the result of a specific sequence: the cynical manipulation of the environment, discipline to move in total darkness, and violent application of enchanted steel.